I could hear them taking things, robbing all the rooms in the house, before the footsteps made their way into the living room. The way I had it set up, the couch was diagonal in the corner, so I was kind of closed off behind it, but the couch was also short, so if they got close to it, they would easily be able to see me. I just listened as they walked around, moving things and opening every drawer and box they saw. Then one of the men started walking closer to the couch. I hoped and waited for their footsteps to stop or change directions, but they kept coming closer and closer until I saw their head show above me. They were looking down at the cushions, though, and I guess they didn't see me in the side of their vision. Then they moved on to the next room. I sat there motionless for almost 30 minutes, listening to them rummage through the entire house before they finally left. I didn't hear them say anything about coming back, but I grabbed my phone and ducked back behind the couch as I called the cops. The situation is mostly exactly what it seems like. The men came in and robbed the valuables from my home. I had forgotten to lock the front door, but there's some evidence that it wouldn't have mattered. A neighbor said they saw two men watching my house rather suspiciously over the course of the past week. Likely they saw that I lived alone and always parked in the driveway. So when I took my car to the New Year's party and came back in an Uber without my car, they thought I wasn't home. Thankfully, it seems they only intended to rob me and nothing more. But had they found me, who knows what could have happened? I was at home with my dog Hazel. It was a normal night. I'd gotten out of work already and was just trying to enjoy the few hours I had before bed. I was watching TV and eating some snacks when Hazel got up and went to the back door, wanting to be let out. I got up and let her outside to do her business. I had a pretty small fenced-in backyard, so I never really needed to keep an eye on her too much. Usually she'd stay out for a while and sniff around anyway. While I was up, I put some dishes away and cleaned up the mess I made from cooking earlier when Hazel started barking. She liked to bark at squirrels and stuff, but after a few seconds, she still hadn't let up. I walked over to the back door and opened it, seeing Hazel standing by the side of the fence and barking at it, like something was on the other side. It was just woods on that side of the fence, so I thought maybe she'd seen a coyote or something. Just to be safe, I called her back inside. I got back on the couch and turned the TV on. Something was immediately different about Hazel, though. Usually she'd lay on or next to me. But she was sitting on the edge of the couch, head perked up and staring at the back door. No matter how much I'd call her over, she'd just glance at me, then go back to watching. She was like this for the rest of the night. A couple times I did look over there, but saw nothing. I thought she was just in protective mode for some reason, which she does randomly sometimes. We stayed up for a bit, then went to bed at 10:30. Hazel usually sleeps on the end of my bed or on her doggy bed in the corner of the room, but I always leave the bedroom door cracked open because her food and water is downstairs. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I noticed the bedroom door was wide open, much more than I had left it. Maybe she bumped into the door. She wasn't in the room, and I didn't hear her nails clicking on the wooden floor, or the sound of her eating or drinking. On any other day, I'd probably just go back to sleep and not worry about it. But something gave me a bad gut feeling. Even my body seemed to have fully woken up already. I got out of bed and looked out into the hallway. The house was quiet. Hazel. I walked down the steps and into the living room. Everything seemed to be normal, but all the food and water in her bowls were still full. At this point, everything was rushing through my mind. I was scared. Maybe somehow I'd left the back door open and she ran away or something, even though I knew I didn't. I walked into the kitchen and my heart sank, seeing Hazel crouched underneath the table, shivering and shaking and staring at me, completely terrified of something. I called her name again, and she didn't move. And then I noticed the back door was open. Everything was starting to come together in my mind, but I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped and scared and vulnerable. I hurried over to the table and picked Hazel up, then ran right out the back door. I left through the fence gate and ran over to a neighbor's house. It took a minute, but eventually they woke up and answered the door, calling the police for me. When officers searched my home, they didn't find anyone. There were a few signs of shoe prints around the house, though, some even being upstairs. That whole scenario is so confusing and left me with hundreds of questions and zero answers. I don't know who it was or why they broke in, or even how long they'd been inside for. Were they the one to open my bedroom door all the way? Were they hiding when I was looking for Hazel? Were they even still in the house? I almost wish I encountered them before running away, so I'd at least have some sort of answers. Now, I'm left with nothing. I just have to live and hope it was some random thing and that they don't come back. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. This was a little under 2 years ago. Back then, I lived in a small 2-story townhouse and worked remotely from home. The place had a small kitchen and living room on the first floor and 2 bedrooms on the second floor. One of those rooms I used as my office. During this time, the unit connected to mine that I shared a wall with was vacant. Nobody lived there or had moved in over 3 months. This night I was working pretty late. It was rainy and cloudy outside, so I didn't have much else to do, and decided to use the extra time to get ahead on work stuff. I sat in the office on my laptop for a good few hours. The house was quiet as usual, with the soft sounds of the rain outside ticking against the roof. I think it was just about 8 p.m. when, between the quiet clicking of my keyboard, I heard a thump on the wall next to me. I looked over, sort of confused, and heard it again. This was on the shared wall with the vacant unit, so naturally it was kind of odd. After a few seconds of thinking, I thought that it must have been the owner checking up on something, or maybe prepping the unit for a tour in the morning. Regardless, I continued working. Over the course of the next hour or so, I heard random sounds from the other units. Creaks, thumps, and various other similar sounds. Oddly, they were spread out, like I'd hear one creak. Then several minutes would pass before I'd hear anything else. But then, at just about 9:30, I heard a door suddenly creak open and then pushed closed. This was louder than all the other sounds that I'd been hearing throughout the night, which made me feel kind of uneasy. It had been months since I'd heard the sound of the other unit's door open and close, so I didn't actually know how loud or quiet it usually was. After a minute, I decided to take a break and leave the office, heading downstairs just to make sure everything was good with the other unit. I looked out the window next to the front door, seeing if maybe the owner's car was out there, but I didn't see anything. Nothing parked on the driveway or on the road. Also, while down there, I didn't hear a single noise from the other unit. I figured whoever it was must have already left, and so hopefully all the strange noises were done for the night. After checking out the door and double-checking it was locked, I went right back upstairs to my office. I wasn't sure how much longer I really wanted to work for. At this point, I was feeling pretty tired and kind of just wanted to chill in bed for the rest of the night. But I told myself I'd do 30 more minutes. I closed the door to my office, sat down at my desk, and got as much done as I could. During that half hour, I never noticed any more of those sounds coming from the vacant unit. Just the calm rain still trickling down outside. Finally, feeling good about the work I'd gotten done and feeling my eyelids getting heavy, I shut off my laptop and headed out of the office. Turning off the hallway lights and going into my bedroom, I started getting myself ready for bed when a sudden, eerie, and ominous sound echoed through the walls of the house. Someone was whistling a slow, soft tune. I stood there, silently listening for a few moments, I guess in shock of what I was hearing and how out of nowhere it came from. I quietly walked up to my bedroom door and cracked it open. As soon as I did, I could hear it much more clearly. It felt like it was too loud to be from the other unit, or even outside. Feeling really unsettled, I started walking down the hallway as the whistling persisted, filling the quiet halls of the house with the eerie tune. I made my way down the steps and moved toward the back of the house, where I could clearly hear the sound coming from. I peered around the corner into the living room. In the dark, unlit room, a man was sitting in the chair facing the other way toward the black TV screen, continuing to whistle as he stared into the pitch-black room and barely moved. I could only see the general outline of him, but his hand that was on the armrest looked like it had something in it, like a small handgun. I knew he had to have known I was inside, and probably heard me sneaking downstairs. Yet he never looked back. He just stared forward, whistling. It was incredibly disturbing. I didn't know whether to say something or try to sneak away. Why was he even here? How did he even get in? What did he want? My heart was beating faster and faster before I made the sudden decision to run out of the house. I swung open the front door, still hearing the man continue whistling as I ran away. I only looked back once and didn't see him follow, but I did notice the door to the other unit was wide open. I got to the end of the road and called for help. When police got there, they could hear from outside that same eerie tune being whistled from inside. They approached carefully, going down to the living room and finding the man in the exact same position. They said he turned his head slightly to look at them, giving a short, crooked smile, then dropping his gun and letting them arrest him. He basically spoke nothing of what he was doing or had planned to do, or why he was there. Some of the officers I talked to thought he might have been trying to get arrested for some reason. But strangely, there's no information on the guy. No matching fingerprints or identification of any kind. And without him being cooperative, they had no way to find out who he really was, or if he had any kind of mental illness that could be behind all of it. I don't know what other ways that night could have gone down, but even thinking about other possibilities makes me uneasy. Every once in a while, though, I still hear that same eerie tune being whistled in the middle of my dreams, making me wake up in a panic, thinking he could be back. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you, probably RN. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, I was 16. I lived in a small home with my parents at the time, sort of on the outskirts of the city. It was in a smaller wooded neighborhood, about an hour outside of the main city area where both of my parents worked. This was on a regular weekday. It was pretty cloudy and rainy all day. And everyone was talking about this big storm that was supposedly rolling in later tonight. I didn't care too much, so long as I didn't have to walk home in it. Thankfully, it waited until school was out and for me to get home before the rain started picking up. Usually these storms are over-exaggerated, but as I watched TV in the living room with the windows open, the clouds got darker and darker, and then the rain got a lot worse. But honestly, the most unsettling thing was the wind. Our small, old, and basically wooden house was creaking and swaying as the wind slammed against it and rain crashed against the roof. Regardless, I was sure everything was good and kind of just listened to the storm as I watched TV and waited for my parents to get home. At about 5:30 though, my phone alarm suddenly screamed at me about a flash flood warning. Not too much later, my mom called. She said a bunch of the roads on the way home were apparently flooded over, that it was too dangerous for them to drive in, so they'd have to wait it out. I said I was good here, and the house seemed to be holding up, so it wasn't a big deal. Now knowing that my parents were stuck in the city, I got up and found something to eat in the kitchen. As I waited for my meal to heat up in the microwave, I thought I heard something that sounded like a knock, like something knocking on wood. It was so muffled by all the rain and wind that it was hard to tell. And I thought, if it was anything, it was probably just something the wind was smacking against the house. So I ignored it. I grabbed my food and moved back over to the couch to watch TV. But before I could even start eating, I heard it again. This time, it kind of freaked me out because it sounded like it was at the front door, which was pretty much right next to me. And it was the exact same knocking pattern as the one I thought I'd heard when I was in the kitchen. Obviously, this made me think it had to be a person, but outside in this storm, that really didn't make any sense. I was too scared for a minute to even check out the door. So I kind of just sat frozen on the couch and waited for something to happen. But when nothing did, I finally got up and went over to check out the door. I walked up to the door and looked out the peephole. It was mostly fogged over. All I could see were the blurry shapes of heavy rain pouring down. I looked out there for a while, making sure I didn't see any figures move or something. But with no signs of anything, I felt safe opening the door. At first, I was relieved. Nobody was there. It was just the monstrous storm outside. But then I noticed something weird. In the mud coming up to the porch, there were footsteps. I couldn't actually make out the shoe print or anything, but it was clear by the repeating pattern through the mud that they were definitely footsteps. And given the weather, they had to be recent to not have been washed away already. I felt a chill run through my body before I abruptly closed the door. I was really freaked out and really didn't know what to do. The rational side of me wanted to call my parents, or maybe even the police, because this was really strange. with the massive storm going on and for me being alone. But the other side of me didn't. I didn't want to worry anyone over something that was hopefully nothing. I mean, they weren't on the porch, so they must have already left. At least that was my thought process. I stayed more alert, but refrained from calling anyone yet. I told myself if I saw or heard anything else, though, I'd call. I went back to the couch and ate my dinner, keeping the TV volume a bit lower so I could listen to the storm. Honestly, I don't remember much else from that part of the night, because at some point I just laid down and passed out, waiting for my parents to get home. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure why I'd woken up, but the whole house was dark, and the storm was just as loud as it was earlier. I knew a while had passed, though, and I was curious how I'd been able to sleep so long without my parents coming home and waking me up. I picked up my phone and checked the time, but immediately saw I had multiple missed calls and unopened texts from my parents. They were just asking if I was okay and said the roads were still too bad to drive in, and they had to get a hotel in the city for the night. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, not really processing any of the texts I read, and just trying to wake up still. And then I heard probably the most terrifying sound I could have heard in that moment. It was a single footstep on the wooden floor, right above me, not something hitting the house or wind making the house creak. It was unmistakably a footstep inside the house, specifically in my bedroom, which was the room directly above me. My heart started racing as I listened for another few seconds. I followed the sound of the footsteps, staring at the ceiling as they slowly moved through my room. Then they started going toward the door into the upstairs hallway. I knew I had to act fast. I turned my phone on silent and quietly ran into the small downstairs bathroom in the main hallway, keeping the lights off and carefully closing the door behind me and locking it. I don't think they heard me. I opened my phone and turned the brightness on the lowest setting as I called 911. It was pitch black in there, aside from the dim phone screen. Once I saw that the call timer had started, meaning an operator answered, I whispered my name, my address, and what was happening, then went back to staying quiet while keeping the call going. I was afraid to even put my phone on the quietest volume to let me hear the operator, especially as I began hearing the footsteps making their way down the stairs. The low thumps slowly moved through the hallway, rain and wind filling the sound between each step. They walked right past the bathroom door. They kept on until they got to the kitchen, and then a few seconds passed as I waited for the next footstep, and then a few more seconds passed. Before I knew it, I was just waiting for any more sounds or for them to move, but I didn't hear anything. Several long, agonizing minutes passed, until a sudden bang at the front door sounded and police called out. I ran out of the bathroom and opened the door, but it was apparent by the lack of any other sounds inside the house that the intruder was gone. The sliding back door was cracked open, leaving the eerie evidence of their absence. Likely the sound of them breaking inside was drowned out by the heavy storm keeping me asleep. However, that could actually be the reason that I'm still here today. Whoever the intruder was seemed to only go through the hallway, upstairs and into my bedroom. So me staying asleep on the couch and not making myself known was probably for the best. Disturbingly, though, it seems clear that they were looking for me. What's really unnerving to think about, even today, years later, is that I never saw the person. So, I literally know nothing about them, whether they're a man or woman. teenager, or adult. Someone I knew, or someone I didn't know. Or worse, someone that I didn't know, but that knew me. Me and my parents have been pretty on edge for the last few years, hoping whoever it was doesn't attempt to come back to continue whatever they had planned for that night. I live alone in a pretty quiet, cozy neighborhood in a suburban town outside of a small city. I'd been there for several years and really had no issues with it. I knew most of my neighbors and felt like our town was just really quiet and calm. Nothing much ever happened, and I was able to just live my life in peace. This was in the middle of spring. I'd gotten out of work after a long 12-hour shift. Driving home in the dark around 9 p.m., the roads were empty and the neighborhood was still in dark, as most people had been hunkered down inside from the pouring rain for the past several days. Now, I pulled into my home and went inside, warming up some leftovers in the oven and resting on the couch as I settled in for the night. Only 10-ish minutes after I'd gotten home, though, there was a rather loud knock at the front door. I was really put off by it, unsure who it could be or what it could be for. But I got up and saw a man standing on my porch. He had a black rain jacket on and looked drenched. I opened the door. "Can I help you with something?" The man looked at me for a moment. His eyes were droopy, like he was very tired, and his face was stiff and motionless. He looked a bit older than me, maybe in his early 30s, with a dark beard and longish brown hair soaked by the rain. Finally, he answered, speaking slowly and without much emotion, explaining that his dog jumped his fence and he wanted to know if I'd seen it. I said no, that I haven't seen anything. He nodded in an understanding way, but his eyes wandered past me and into my house as he slowly turned away and walked off the porch. I closed the door. I thought the guy was kind of weird, but maybe he was just really tired and frustrated, especially with all this happening at night and in rainy weather. I hoped he'd find his dog soon, though. And aside from that, I went back to the couch and forgot about it. I want to say, I was sitting there watching TV for maybe 15 minutes before there was a sudden knock at the front door again. Immediately, I was sure it was the same guy, but I had no idea why he'd come back. I got up very confused and sort of concerned as well. Sure enough, when I looked out, I saw the same guy standing behind the door. I opened it, and this time I wasn't quite as friendly, just straight up asking him what he wanted. He had that same cold look as before. The man pointed toward the side of my house and said he saw his dog run into my backyard and asked if he could go look around back there. The way he said it was kind of strange, though. No, I'm not sure how to explain it, but yeah, something was clearly not right to get him off my back. And in case he was telling the truth, I said sure he could go back there and look around. He said thank you, but at the same time, as I was starting to close the door, he took a step forward, almost like he thought I was going to let him inside, to lead him through the house to my back door. I just continued closing the door, though. I'm not sure why he would have thought that when he could easily just walk around the house and to my backyard. I looked out to make sure he left, and he did, going around to the side of my house. After all of that, though, I wasn't too comfortable with the guy just wandering around, so I went to the kitchen, where I could watch out the back door. I didn't, stare at him through the door or anything, but I cleaned up some stuff on the counters, while occasionally looking back at what he was up to. Every time I looked, it seemed like he was just walking around the perimeter of the yard. Until one time, I looked back and his face was right behind the glass, looking in at me. It literally made me jump. I yelled through the glass, asking what he wanted. He called out, asking if his dog was inside my house. What the hell was wrong with this guy? I sternly said no, clearly showing that I was getting impatient with him. But the man kept asking, wanting me to let him in the house to look around for his dog. He'd bang on the door every time I wouldn't answer. I could see it in his face that he was getting unnervingly angry at the fact that I wouldn't let him in. It was getting kinda horrifying. As he kept hitting the door and yelling at me, I called the police. Only then, once he saw me take my phone out, did he finally stop and leave, which only made it more suspicious as to what he was truly up to. Police came and took a report from me of what happened and what he looked like and all that sort of stuff, but that's where it was left at. There wasn't much they could do right then and there. However, unfortunately, a week later, there was an incident really similar to mine. It's unclear if he forced his way in or was just allowed inside by the victims, but the story was almost exactly the same as what happened to me. A man came knocking on their door looking for his dog, only for it to take an awful turn. It makes me even more disturbed. By that night, the man came by my place doing the same thing. Had I listened to him, or been any more willing to help, I could have suffered a similar fate to the others. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Alright, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. I was delivering food alone at night, but when I saw who was hiding in my back seat, I froze. I was on my way to deliver an order from the sandwich shop I worked for. It was a quiet night, around 11 o'clock or so. I had my music playing in my car, and I was just running through the motions of the delivery. On my way to their neighborhood, I pulled up to a red light. There was nobody else at the intersection, but for some reason, the light stayed red for what felt like an abnormal amount of time. As I sat there and stared at the light, waiting for it to change, a car pulled up beside me. I only glanced over for a second, not wanting to make that awkward eye contact, but their windows were heavily tinted, like definitely more than what was legal, as I couldn't see a single thing through them. The car itself was black as well, maybe an old Toyota or something. I can't really pinpoint what it was, but I got a really uneasy feeling about them. It could have just been that we were the only two on the road. I'm really not sure. Eventually, the light turned green, and I started going. I didn't get very far, though, before noticing they hadn't moved. They were still parked at the intersection. Once I got further down the road, I shrugged it off and just thought it was weird and nothing else. A couple minutes later, I pulled off into the section of housing that the delivery was in. I'd say neighborhood, but it wasn't really a neighborhood. It was just a line of 10 or so houses leading to a dead end. Something about it seemed really off-putting. Of all the houses on the street, not a single one had a light on. I 100% would have thought these places were abandoned, if not for the fact that the houses themselves looked really nice. They looked like ordinary neighborhood homes, with not a single sign of anything wrong with them. I figured it had to just be a coincidence that every resident down the street had their lights off. Anyway, The address I had was for the second to last house. I pulled up and parked on the curb, getting out with the order and walking up to the door. I was hoping I'd at least see some sort of light coming through the windows of this house because it was the one I was delivering to. But standing on the porch, I didn't see any light. Reluctantly, I knocked on the door. When I did, the door swung a bit from its hinges, like it wasn't properly shut or locked. Now this was even more odd. Sandwich delivery. Anyone home? It was completely silent, no response, and not even the slightest sound from inside the house. I was gonna leave, but just to be sure I didn't miss anything, I cracked the door open a little further. I could see a hallway and a room. Both were empty of any furniture or decorations, not even a single picture on the wall. It only took a few seconds before dust started coming through the doorway too. I shut it and backed up from the porch. I was very confused and slightly worried. As I walked back down to my car, though, I noticed something down the road. A few houses back, there was a small black car that wasn't there when I pulled in. Its headlights were off and it was parked. Once I saw the tinted windows, I immediately recognized it. I felt my face go white, knowing this could not possibly be a coincidence at this point. I started to hurry to my car, but as I got just a few feet away from the road, I saw something move in the reflection of one of the windows. I wasn't sure what it was that I saw, but I stopped in place. I was standing near the passenger door and through the window. My eyes fell on the back seat. It was dark, but there was something blocking the back window. It only took me about a second for me to realize what I saw. I turned and bolted back to the house. As I did, the back door to my car swung open, and a man in a black hoodie and black pants came running out. He didn't chase me, though. He ran straight down to the road and into his car. I stayed on the porch, and with my heart pounding, I dialed 911. I probably could have gotten in my car and left at that point, but I was too scared to really think straight. Police arrived and immediately told me that this whole street was unoccupied, as the homes were new builds. Guess that explains why I thought they looked so nice and not abandoned. What I definitely didn't expect was to hear them say that they've had multiple reports this past week, very similar to mine. The guy would order something for delivery with a fake name and address, then follow the driver. What happened to me was the closest call of any of them, though. The guy had snuck inside my car and was waiting for me to get in and maybe even drive away. Who knows what he was trying to do? Unfortunately, there haven't been any updates on finding him. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you. Probably aren't. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, this was last year toward the beginning of December. One of my good friends was going on a trip with his family and would be gone for a whole week. He asked if I wanted to sit his place while they were gone. We were really good family friends, so this wasn't all that unusual. I actually did the same thing for them last year as well. They had a couple fish tanks and a lot of houseplants that they needed me to take care of while they were away. And in return, I'd get to stay at their house for a week. I lived in a really small apartment, so I was always glad to take them up on the offer and help out. I headed over a couple hours before they left, just to hang out and get a refresher on everything that I needed to do. Once they left, I unpacked some things and got settled in. And around 6, I went out to pick up some dinner. I brought it back to the house and ate in the living room while watching TV. Only a half hour later, there was a knock at the door. I paused the show and got up, looking to see who it was. It was a man in his 30s. He wasn't wearing a delivery uniform or anything. He just looked like a regular dude. I cracked the door open and asked what he needed. He looked startled to see me, but quickly recovered and asked if my friend was home right now. He called him by his name, so I thought he might have been a friend or something. But I told him he'd have to come back some other time. He didn't ask anything else and just walked away. I probably should have asked what he needed, but I felt like he should have told me to begin with. I was sure it was nothing, but I texted my friend just to let him know who came by. He called me soon after and asked who he was, and after a brief conversation, he said he had no idea who that guy could have been. I kept an eye out for the rest of the day, but still felt like it was probably nothing serious. I watched TV for a while, then went around the house, watering the plants and feeding the fish. Around 9, I started getting the couch set up for bed. I tossed a few blank down and made a little sleeping area. As I did, there was another knock at the door. I walked over, more confused than anything, but was immediately unnerved to see the same guy outside the door. This time, I didn't open it. "Hey, what do you need?" "Can you come back a different day?" I yelled through the door. I watched as the man listened and stared at the door like he was thinking. But instead of responding, he just walked away again. I made sure the door was locked before going back to the couch. It was then that I definitely should have called the police, but for some reason, I really didn't want to. Especially being at someone else's house, I was worried that this was all just a misunderstanding. Not to mention, the guy hadn't actually done anything yet. I would just have to explain that he came by twice and stood at the door. It kind of sounds silly, honestly. It definitely woke me up, though, and I didn't feel comfortable going to bed right away. I stayed up on my phone and had the window curtains open so I could see if he walked up again. I probably waited for a good 2 hours before my eyes started getting heavy. I did one last check out the windows before closing the curtains and getting ready for bed. I brushed my teeth, then hopped in the shower to quickly rinse off. By the time I got out, dried off, and went back downstairs, it had been less than 10 minutes. I went around and turned off all the lights, and before getting in bed, I figured I'd do one last check out the windows, just to help me sleep easy. I looked out, seeing nothing but trees swaying in the wind and the empty road in front of the house. I stepped back, and as I went back over to the couch, my eyes drifted toward the front door, catching something off. The lock was sideways. I walked over, thinking I was seeing things wrong, but no, it was unlocked. I was completely certain I'd locked it, not even a doubt in my mind. I froze up for a second before I felt adrenaline surge through me. I turned around and crept over to the couch to grab my phone that I'd left on the end table, but it wasn't there. Someone had already taken it. I didn't stay a second longer, grabbing my keys and running out the front door. I used the emergency button in my car to call 911 as I pulled out of the driveway and parked further down the road to wait. When police pulled up and searched the home, they found the man, same one that came by twice, sitting in one of the spare bedrooms. When they arrested him, he didn't say a word, like he was completely mute. They found a forged key in his pocket that matched the front door, and nobody knows how he got it. My friend told me again that he had no clue who the man was or why he'd break into his home. But it honestly felt like there was something he wasn't telling me. Suspiciously, we haven't talked much after that either. I don't know what was going to happen that night. If I didn't notice the door was unlocked and went to bed, I really don't think I would have woken up. It was a normal night after work, getting home at 10. I was exhausted but ready to stay up late in game. All my buddies worked early tomorrow, so I was just playing solo and relaxing. A few hours into the night, I heard what sounded like a knock. I took my headphones off and listened for it again, but it was quiet now. I thought surely it had to be a knock at the front door. As it was pretty loud and I didn't know what else it could be, I went over to check it out, but nobody was on the porch. The more I thought about it, a single knock would have been odd if there was someone at the door. I still didn't know what it was that I heard, but I went back to gaming. It must have only been half an hour later that I heard another sound. It was a sort of click, like something closing. I immediately took my headset off and looked behind me. Again, the house was quiet now. I got up and did a walkthrough of the house. I didn't thoroughly check every inch of the place. I was just trying to spot any obvious signs of what I'd been hearing. The house was fairly old, so usually I chalk these things up to being the aging wood. After checking around and not seeing anything, that's exactly what I did, and I went back to my desk. I was still a little hesitant to put my headset back on, but eventually I did anyway. Only a couple minutes later, though, a reflection suddenly moved across my computer screen. Maybe it was a shadow. I don't know. But I jumped up and spun around. This time, it was almost like I knew, without a doubt, that someone was inside my home and had just walked somewhere behind me. My desk was in the living room, so there was a long hallway behind it with 3 separate rooms, and at the end was the front door. I took a few seconds to recollect myself and think about which way the reflection moved across my screen, and realized it had moved from the left side of the hallway to the right side. There was only one door on the right, which was to my bedroom. It felt like in that moment, the silence of the whole house was deafening, making each second pass feel more and more terrifying, knowing almost for sure that someone else was in that room. I decided my best bet was to just run for the front door and hope whoever was in the room didn't jump out at me. After a few seconds, I forced myself to move, running down the hall and through the front door. I heard nothing as I fled the house. I called the cops and waited outside for several long minutes. They went in, and I still couldn't believe it when they pulled a man out the front door. I knew someone had broken in, but actually seeing it was really unsettling. He looked around 55, but was very large. His face was uncanny, with wide, bloodshot eyes and a disheveled beard. Even worse, they found 2 knives on him. It seemed he had no particular reason for choosing me as a victim of whatever he was trying to do, which I guess was supposed to make me feel better. But honestly, it didn't. It just means he was completely insane and would have done anything without hesitation had he had the chance to. I think I just got really lucky that night to even be standing here today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. He said he was lost, But by morning, his footprints circled my cabin, then disappeared up the side of the wall. I was spending a week at a remote cabin nestled in the Cascades of Washington. The place was miles away from any city, down a long dirt road surrounded by thick forest. Winter was just beginning, so there was a light dusting of snow, enough to notice, but nothing heavy. The first 3 days were calm, peaceful, and relaxing. Then halfway through the 4th day, I heard a knock at the door. I had no clue who it could be. Since there was no way to see the porch from inside, I got up and opened the door. Standing there was a man. He wore a heavy winter coat and a black wool hat. His face was pale, with flushed cheeks, and snow clung to his jacket. It was clear he'd been out in the cold for some time. "How can I help you?" I asked. He gave a friendly smile and explained that he was a little lost, trying to find his way back into town. I was confused. Was he trying to walk the 1-hour drive to town in the cold and snow? And how did he even get out here in the first place? Take a left here and follow it to the main road. It's a straight shot from there." I figured it wasn't any of my business, so I just told him what he asked for. He smiled and nodded. There was a strange pause for a few seconds as he just stood there, and neither of us spoke. I got uncomfortable and sat by, closing the door. I heard his boots walk off the porch soon after. It was an interesting interaction for sure, but I went back to what I was doing and forgot about it not too long after. Several hours passed. The light snowfall from earlier had started to pick up, which made me a little nervous because I wasn't sure how my car would handle the dirt roads with thick snow. To keep an eye on the weather, I went to the back door and pulled the curtains back so I could have a view from the living room. When I did, I was kind of startled. There were shoe prints in the snow walking around the back of the cabin. Again, I was so far out that anyone just walking around here was very strange. It was hard to tell how fresh the prints were, though. I wasn't sure how long the snowfall had picked up for, so it could have been as long as several hours ago or as soon as just a few minutes ago. My mind immediately thought back to the man who came by the door earlier. Had he gone around the cabin before going up to the door? Maybe he thought the cabin might be empty and was snooping around to find out. That would be really creepy, though. I felt really uneasy after seeing those shoe prints in the snow. It didn't help that the sun had already set too. It was too dark, cold, and windy outside to even try to look around. I closed the curtains and went around to make sure all the doors were locked, then turned off all the lights and went into the bedroom. There wasn't a TV in there or anything, so I just pulled up a video to watch on my laptop as I laid in bed. I was trying to relax and shake the uneasy feeling I had. It took a while, like probably an hour, before I was feeling better. The steady sound of the snow outside in the dark cabin room started to make me sleepy. I shut the laptop screen and started getting ready for bed when a knock came from the front door. I physically jumped. I stood still for a moment while I just felt my mind go blank from the sudden fear that came over me. They knocked again. "Hey, it's me again. I'm still lost. It's cold out here. Can you please help me?" It was the man who stopped by earlier. Why the hell was he still around here? I opened the bedroom door so I could listen better and looked out into the main area of the cabin. It was really dark, and the man continuously knocking was extremely unsettling. But then, after, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds, the knocking stopped. The wind outside felt like it picked up. It was the only thing I could hear. I really wanted to know if he left, though, or where he went. I quietly crept out into the main room, which I knew had all the curtains and blinds closed, so he shouldn't be able to see me. Without opening the door, my only option was to look out one of the windows. It didn't have a clear view of the porch, but I could see the front of the cabin leading up to the road. I pushed the curtain aside and looked. I could see a set of footprints going up to the porch, but none leaving. He must still be at the door. I walked back and got my phone. Service was good enough to call 911. They estimated it would be 45 minutes before they would make it. I locked myself in the bedroom and waited. 10 minutes went by with not a single sound, which was really eerie, knowing he had to be just silently standing outside the door. All I heard was the heavy wind smacking against the windows. Then there was a sudden thud against the cabin. I had no idea what it was, but it sounded like it came from the front of the cabin, and it was pretty loud. But then it was silent again. I was shaking and terrified. Time seemed to move extremely slow. After some time, flashing red and blue lights appeared outside the windows. Relieved, I rose and headed toward the front door, until an officer's shout cut through the silence. "Get down!" I heard more commands and sensed something serious was unfolding outside. Then the loud thud echoed through the cabin once again, followed by more shouting from the officer. It turned out the man had never left. He had climbed up onto the roof of the cabin and was apparently just waiting there, maybe hoping I'd forget about him and leave the door unlocked in the middle of the night. I don't know for sure. The officer ordered him down and arrested him for trespassing. Beyond that, the man refused to admit to any specific intentions. Still, it was chilling to realize he'd been lurking around my cabin all day. What he was really planning remains a mystery, but it was almost certainly something dark and sinister. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you. Probably aren't. So, now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, I work overnight at a 24-hour ice cream shop. It's a tiny spot, basically just one room, that could fit maybe 10 customers at once. Still, it's pretty popular in our small town. Mostly, it's a hangout for local high schoolers, since the parking lot is large, and there are a bunch of empty, abandoned stores next door. It's like a mini strip mall, but the ice cream place is the only business still running. Usually, the crowd clears out by 10 p.m., leaving just the occasional group of kids dropping in late at night. I do part-time shifts overnight, usually from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. That night, I came in and started by cleaning up the mess left behind by the earlier shift. It only took about half an hour, so after that, I just sat back and waited. By around 1 a.m., a group of teenagers showed up. Other than that, the place was completely dead. Halfway through my shift, I got so bored that I decided to do some extra cleaning up around the back. I tossed a bunch of garbage out and headed outside to toss it into the dumpster. The dumpster was actually in the front of the shop, kind of on the side of the big parking lot near the other abandoned shops. I walked over and tossed the trash in. The night was quiet. Not even any cars out driving around. As I walked back, though, I noticed a light flicker in one of the abandoned shops. I thought it had to be a reflection of a car passing by or something, but after looking at the road and again seeing no cars, I got really confused. Was I just seeing things? I walked slower, keeping my eyes on the front windows of the store and just waiting for something. Then it happened again. A light shined past the windows for only a few seconds. It looked kind of like someone shining a flashlight around deep inside the back of the store. After that brief sighting, though, it didn't happen again. So I really had no way to confirm anything. The only part that kind of shook me about this was that the light was in the abandoned building that was attached to the ice cream shop. So it was just on the other side of the wall where I worked. I reassured myself that if it was someone in there, it was probably just some kids exploring the empty building, completely harmless. There really wasn't much else to do, aside from wait around for the rest of my shift. It was about 2 a.m. now. I leaned against the counter and just stared out the front windows, spacing out, when I heard something beside me. I looked at the wall, and it sounded again against the other side of the wall. It was relatively quiet, though. I only noticed it because the night was completely silent. I quickly connected the dots between the sound and the light I saw in that building, and was 99% sure someone had broken into there. I thought about possibly calling the cops, just to let them know, but my train of thought was interrupted when a customer walked in. It was always strange when a single customer came in the middle of the night, like with no friends or anything. But this guy was even more odd. He was in his 40s, and he looked very unkempt. Long, untrimmed beard, greasy hair, and a tired look all over his face. As he walked up to the counter, his stench was almost unbearable. "Welcome in. What can I give for you?" He looked at me, then at the display case, then back up at me after a few seconds of him not saying anything. He smiled, backed up, and left out the door. I whispered "what the hell" under my breath, really creeped out by that encounter. It was insanely odd. That, combined with whatever was happening in the empty building next door, made the night feel really unsettling. I wasn't quite sure what to do, other than hope I was just imagining things and wait for my shift to end. To clear my mind and take a break from it all, I decided to take my lunch. Normally, I'd just eat in the back room, but that night I wanted some fresh air and a change of scenery. So I grabbed my lunch bag and stepped outside to my car. I sat down inside and ate while staring out the window. A few minutes quietly passed. The night was still really quiet, and the light in the building was nowhere to be seen. Then I saw someone come around the corner of the shop, followed by another person. I recognized the jacket being the same strange guy that came in only a few minutes ago. The other guy I hadn't seen before, but he had something in his hand. I was far away, but I was reasonably certain that it was a flashlight. I felt a lump in my throat as I watched the men go into the ice cream shop and start looking around. Not like customers looking for someone to take their order, but like angry men searching for their victim. I dial 911. The men jumped over the counter and looked in the back room, coming back out 30 seconds later and running out of the shop. They didn't steal anything. They were definitely looking for me. They ran around the back of the building and disappeared. When cops got there, the men were gone. One of the empty stores had its door broken open, so those guys had definitely been inside. What exactly they were doing in there remains a mystery. It seemed like one of them came into the ice cream shop to check if I was alone, then went back to fetch his friend. By coincidence, I happened to be eating my lunch in the car at that moment. If I hadn't, I'm not sure what might have happened next. I live in a pretty old apartment building. It was just affordable enough for me to live alone, and that was really the only reason I chose it. But it definitely came with its fair share of problems. Anyway, this was just a typical night after finishing work. It was late, though I'd actually left work 2 hours early. I got home, heated up some dinner, and then settled on the couch to watch TV for the rest of the evening. I was already exhausted and had no plans to stay up late. The dim lights and the soft glow from the TV only made me feel sleepier. I think I was home for barely an hour before deciding to call it a night. I turned off the TV, headed to my bedroom, and was asleep within 5 minutes. I don't recall it being windy that night. I mentioned that because a few hours later, I woke up to a creaking noise. Since the building is old, even a light breeze usually makes it shift and causes these echoing creaks and groans through the walls. But this time, I didn't think it was windy outside, and the creak I heard wasn't the usual kind. As these thoughts raced through my mind, the creaking started again, and this time, it wouldn't stop. It was almost in this rhythmic pattern. One creak, followed by a second of silence. Then another creak again and again, sounding like it was from somewhere on the other side of my apartment. I got out of bed. My heart was pacing, but I still wasn't totally convinced that it wasn't the old building. I opened my bedroom door. There was a hallway that led down to the front door. And at the end, on either side, was the kitchen and living room. I looked down the hallway as I could now hear that the creaking was coming from the left side. It took me a moment, but I started to realize the sound was moving across the floor, and by the time I noticed it getting louder, I couldn't even react before seeing a figure suddenly appear at the end of the hallway. My entire body tensed up and froze. But the man didn't look down at me. They kept walking slowly across the end of the hallway. They just stared ahead, never looking down the hallway. Adrenaline pumped through me, and I moved back around the corner into my room. I didn't close the door, scared of making a sound. The creaking continued through the kitchen. A few times they stopped, and it sounded like they opened and closed a few of the cabinets before walking again. My heart was racing even faster. How did he get in? And it had to be only a matter of time before he came walking down the hallway. Just as I was thinking this, I saw his shadow move toward the end of the hallway, but again he walked past it. The creaking moved through the living room, and then I heard the soft squeak of them sitting on my couch. Everything about this made no sense, making it even more horrifying. I crept over to my bed and got my phone, then texted 911. I was still too scared to call and risk them hearing me. The next 3 or 4 minutes were just full of tension and anxiety, knowing this guy was just on the other side of my apartment, sitting on my couch, and could at any moment get up and walk into my room. But he never did. I got a text that the officers were in the building and coming up to my door, so I gathered up my courage and sprinted down the hallway and opened the door for them. They stormed in and tackled the guy, who'd barely even gotten up from the couch. I didn't recognize the man at all. Apparently, he climbed up the side of the building and got onto my balcony on the second floor, which didn't even have a lock on the sliding door. It feels almost impossible that this wasn't a targeted break-in at my place. But the man denied everything. He claimed he was just trying to rob some random apartment, even though he hadn't taken anything and didn't have a backpack or anything to carry stolen items. What's stranger is that he actually sat down on my couch and just hung out, like he was waiting for something. Plus, it would have been so much easier to break in a unit on the first floor. Part of me wonders if my leaving work early that day had something to do with it. Did he somehow know my schedule? Was that why he was sitting on the couch, assuming I wasn't home yet, and waiting for me? There's really no way to be sure. I think it's the uncertainty of his intentions that makes this whole thing so unsettling. Would he try again? Was I specifically being targeted? Or was it just incredibly bad luck? I'm really hoping I won't have to come back with a similar story in the future. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. You're 13 years old, home alone in the middle of nowhere. A loud bang outside makes your heart stop. You grab a rifle, thinking you're ready, until you hear it. Slow, creaking footsteps coming from upstairs. And then, from right outside the bathroom door, a deep voice whispers, "What's up, kid?" This isn't a movie. This really happened. Growing up, I was raised in rural Michigan. There was hardly anything to do. If you like staring at trees and crops and lots of alone time, that was the place to be. I got out of there as soon as I got a car and enough money to move. I'm not a nature hater or anything, but I'd pick being by a big city any day. My parents don't own that property anymore. They sold it 5 years ago. But to describe it, it was a 3-acre property. The house itself was pretty big, and there was a storage building out back. I was 13 when this happened. My parents would leave me alone, often at this age. They trusted me because I matured at a young age, and I had responsibilities on the property. It was a weekend, and I was playing Vice City on my PS2 in the living room, when suddenly a loud metallic bang came from outside, somewhere in the yard. I right away ran to every window I could to look outside to see if I could see something, and I didn't see anything until I got to the window looking out to the storage building out back. The door to it was completely open. I went immediately to grab the rifle from the closet and go outside. I made my presence known, shouting who's in there to no avail. When I got to the door, I made it known I had a gun before looking inside. There was a bunch of stuff in there, from the sit-down mower to the quad to infinite little lawn care items. Someone could have been hiding behind any of that stuff. Even as a kid, I didn't scare easily. But at that moment, I got really unsettled. And so I closed the door to the building and went back inside the house. I locked the door and then sat at the window for the longest time, watching the storage building, expecting the door to open at any second. That door was heavy and impossible to just open by itself. It was simply a fact that someone came and opened it. Whether they were still inside of the building, I wasn't sure. I decided to go call my dad and ask his opinion. I went to the kitchen, to the landline phone, and called my dad's cell phone. He didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail. This was back when you'd still have to leave someone a voicemail because texting wasn't mainstream. After that, I went back to sitting next to the window. But now, I put on a TV show in the background to make this less monotonous. I took the phone with me. I was probably about to give up when I heard creaks from upstairs. My heart was now in my throat. I had to ask myself the big question. Was I working myself up, or was someone here? I had a serious guard dog mentality. Even if I didn't love that place, I saw it as mine, my family's. I had to protect it, but I was in over my head. I grabbed the rifle again and walked upstairs. I didn't say anything. Calling out would only make a potential intruder know that I heard them. I made it to the top of the stairs and I turned on the light for the upstairs hallway. There were 5 doors to open, all of them closed. 4 led to bedrooms. 1 led to the bathroom. Each door had a decently large crack underneath that would allow you to see under. The creak in the ceiling I heard moments earlier came from the side of the house my parents' bedroom was on. So I got down on my knees and looked under the crack of the door, and I saw 2 bare feet facing the other side of the door. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. The reality of the situation just became so much more real, and I realized I wasn't ready to threaten or, God forbid, shoot someone. I got up and quickly went downstairs. When I hid in the bathroom to call my dad, he still didn't pick up. I left another voicemail, and then I called again and again. He never picked up. He must have had his phone set down somewhere. I finally called 911, as I should have done right away, and I whispered into the phone the whole time, detailing exactly what was taking place. I was told to sit tight in the bathroom and not say a word. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, and then they approached the bathroom door. As if whoever it was somehow knew, I went straight to the bathroom. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and there was a brief pause before a deep voice said, "What's up, kid?" I still remember the voice and those words so vividly. If I heard that voice today, I'd still recognize it immediately. I almost wanted to cry. That's how scared I was. I disobeyed what the operator told me, and I spoke. I said loud and clear, "I'm on the phone with the cops right now, and I have a gun." I put the operator on speaker as she was asking me if everything's okay. The man attempted to open the door, and when he realized it was locked, I heard him walk away. I heard the footsteps fade to silence, and then the sound of a door slamming. It was the sound of the back door. I'm sure I breathed a sigh of relief, and from there on, I waited for the police to arrive when they did. I felt like 1,000,000 pounds just lifted off my shoulders. After a thorough inspection of the house, inside and out, confirming that the man was gone, they asked if there was anywhere else I could stay that night, and I said, yes, my uncle's house. We contacted my uncle, who came and spoke with the police. Then he took me back to his place. The thing that haunts me the most is that it was my fault. I could have prevented this. I left the door unlocked as I went to the storage building to investigate. Clearly, that's when the man simply walked right into the house. Even with a rifle in my hands, I didn't feel safe at all. It was truly the most horrific experience of my life. I was 18 when my parents went away on a week-long anniversary trip. My sister had already moved out by this point, so I had to hold the fort. My parents' property is enclosed by woods and a dirt driveway leading to the road. The road is a quiet back road with equally sized properties running alongside it. All of them separated a decent distance, so it's a really isolated feel up there. Everyone in town knows each other. You see familiar faces all the time, for the most part. At the gas station, at the grocery store, at the bars, which I learned a few years later when I started going to them. Speaking of gas stations, this story starts one day, while my parents were away. I was at a gas station filling up my tank when a black Jeep Cherokee pulled up to the pump next to mine. A man with a goatee stepped out, greeted me, and started filling his tank. In that town, it was normal for strangers to greet each other like that. He had his nozzle locked into the gas tank, and then he walked around to my side of the pump and went, "Excuse me, do you know how to get to the interstate from here?" I helped him to the best of my ability. He pulled out a notepad and started writing down the directions I gave him. Very odd how he wouldn't just do that on his cell phone like anyone else would. He thanked me and asked if I'm from the area. I said, "Yeah, I grew up here," and he said he's from out of town. He didn't specify where. He then went back to his side and put the nozzle back in the pump. He then asked my name, as he said, "It's nice meeting you." I said, "My name's Kate." He said, "What a lovely name," and then got in his car as I got into mine. I drove out first and turned left to go up the road back home. It was only a few minutes worth of driving before I was approaching our turn into the driveway. I slowed down and put my blinker on, then turned right onto the property. It was at that moment that I noticed the car behind me was that same black Jeep Cherokee. He passed me as I turned into our driveway. He went the complete opposite way that I told him to go to get to the interstate. As he passed me, he didn't slow down or anything, so it seemed that maybe he just forgot the directions I gave him and went the wrong way. I let myself inside and went about the rest of my day doing whatever. I think it was that night that I was going out to meet up with my friends that I stepped outside and walked to my car and heard the sound of footsteps nearby. Like I said, the house is enclosed by woods. And this was in the middle of the summertime. It could have been any number of animals, so I didn't investigate. I just got in my car and left. But when I got back home hours later and walked from my car to the house, a man's voice from out somewhere in the woods called out, "Kate." I got the chills as I looked around and then, in a panic, rushed open the front door. I slammed it shut and sat on the couch to breathe. The neighbors all knew my name, but the houses are not on top of each other, so it's a bit of a walk, and there was no reason for one of them to call my name like that, like a creep, and not identify themselves. I decided to call my parents to tell them. And their explanation was, it must have been one of the neighbors, and they'll probably knock on the door. I didn't tell them about the encounter at the gas station. The next day, which was a Saturday, I stayed home most of the day, and later that night I once again was going out to meet with my friends. After getting ready and everything, I went outside, and as I was walking to my car, I heard loud and clear from the not-so-far distance, someone called Kate again. This time, I didn't wait a second. I ran back inside the house and locked the door again. I called 911 this time, texting my family while doing so. After 2 cops showed up to the house, they looked around the perimeter of the property with their flashlights, then came back and said to call again if this persisted. I didn't feel much better after this. It's not really like they did much. I refrained for going outside until the next day when I had work. I was a server at a nearby restaurant. I was working a late shift. I left the house in broad daylight, paranoid to hear that voice again. Thankfully, though, I didn't. Maybe seeing the police car finally scared them off. After many hours at work, I was ready to go home and collapse into bed. I pulled onto the property, parked my car out front, and walked to the front door. I stopped when I heard the sound of footsteps again. It didn't sound like an animal's footsteps, though. I stood on the front deck for a second, waiting. Then that familiar voice yelled out again, saying, "Kate, don't call the cops on me again, cutie." I yelled out, "You need help. You're sick," and let myself inside. I called the cops once more, and the cops came again, searched the perimeter again, and left. My parents told me I should stay at a friend's house for the night. I couldn't agree more. They would be back the following night, so after that, I would feel much safer being there. My friend Alex told me I could stay with her that night, so I packed a bag and was ready to go. I checked out the windows first to make sure the coast was clear. I then went outside and locked the door as fast as I could, then ran to the car. As I turned the key in the ignition, I heard something right to my left. Right outside the driver's side door was a man wearing a face mask trying to open the door. I couldn't even scream. I felt like I was choking on air. As I put the car in drive, he started hitting the glass with his elbow. I looped my car around on the grass and speed down the driveway, and I turned right up the road and didn't stop until I got to Alex's house. I was hysterically crying the whole drive there, as I had Alex and her dad on the phone with me. He said he would have come and picked me up had he known the situation. We called the police together for a third time in total. A couple officers went to my parents' house to investigate again. Make sure no windows were shattered or anything. One officer came to Alex's house, where I once again gave my description of what happened. This was probably the most action these cops had seen in a long time in this quiet town. Thankfully, my parents came home the next day, and I felt safe staying at home again. I fully believed the man at the gas station followed me home intentionally and scoped the place out, realizing I was by myself, and for whatever reason toyed with me until he actually tried to pounce and get me. I shouldn't have given my real name, and I should have been more alert to my surroundings and realized he was following me in my car that day. Some people are nuts and have way too much time on their hands. This incident was a huge motivating factor in my moving out to my own apartment a few months later. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you, probably Army. So, now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, I was home alone one night for a reason I don't remember. All I remember is my entire family was gone. I was 15 or 16 years old. I was a big gamer at the time. I was obsessed with StarCraft, and admittedly, I'd sometimes spend a weekend, night or two playing StarCraft or some other PC game. This was right before COVID lockdown started. I was playing StarCraft on my computer, in my bedroom on the first floor. That's when the doorbell rang twice. I hurried to the door, not wanting to be away from the game for too long in fear of losing. I got to the front door and said, "Who is it?" as I always would if I was alone. A soft and weak voice on the other side said something that I couldn't hear. It sounded like a woman. I opened the door, with the storm door still separating me, and this older woman standing on the other side with a big smile on her face. She had her hands behind her back. I said through the door, "Can I help you?" She said she needed to use a phone and asked if she could come inside. Ever since I was a little kid, I was always taught not to let a stranger into the house. Ever. That included women. I felt so awkward, though. I didn't know how to turn her away. I redirected her to the library a few blocks down because they'd surely have a phone. Deep down, I knew the library was closed at this point, but I was just trying to get the stranger who was trying to get into my house to leave. She was still smiling, but what she said next did not match her smile. She said that's very rude to turn away an old lady asking for help. I replied the only way I could think to, and that was that my parents don't allow strangers into the house. It's a house rule. I slowly started closing the door as I was saying sorry, and she just stood there, not moving, but still smiling at me. And though her smile never changed, it suddenly felt much more menacing. I was walking back to my room when the doorbell rang again. There was no way in hell I was opening the door again. That woman radiated weird vibes from the start. Maybe something was wrong with her. Maybe she wasn't all there. These were things I had no way of knowing, and maybe that was selfish of me to send her on her way. But I just wasn't opening the door for anyone when I was home alone. I went back to my game. Not too long after I sat back down, I heard something tapping on the window. It was a clinking type sound from something metal. The window was directly in front of my desk. I had the blind pulled down so I couldn't see what was making the noise, but I already had an idea. My room was the only room with a light on in the house. The horrible thought that it was the old woman from just before and that she walked over to my window terrified me. I turned off the sound on my computer. At this point, I didn't care about my game anymore. The clinking sound on the window persisted. I basically said, "Fuck this," and up and left to a different room in the house. I sat in the darkness of the living room for a bit when the doorbell rang again. This woman was harassing me now. I tried to convince myself she wasn't a threat, just some crazy old woman who's probably clueless as to where she is. When she rang the doorbell a second and third time, I decided to go open the door and ask her if there's someone I could call for her. But when I opened the door, there was now a man on the other side. He looked to be about 10 years younger than her. He said through the storm door, "Have you seen my mother?" I replied, saying yes. She came to my door just before. He then apologized to me and said she has dementia and got out of the house. I suddenly felt bad, but he asked me if he could come in for a minute, and again I felt awkward. Why did he need to come inside? I said the same thing that I told to the woman who we claimed to be his mother. I said we could just talk through this door. I then said that I think she went into my backyard because I heard something out my window. I told him he could go around back and check. He thanked me and walked down the walkway, and I thought he went into the backyard. But when I went to the back and looked out the back window, expecting to see him searching around, I saw nobody, not him or his mom. This was all too weird for me. I went to bed on the earlier side that night, just falling asleep with the TV on in the background, until I heard the clinking sound on the window again. Something metal was tapping on the glass. I remembered the concerned man, and I decided to try and help. I went to the window, lifted the blind up with my hand, and I saw that woman outside my window with that same creepy smile. She was tapping a kitchen knife on my window. I closed the blind and crawled back into my bed. This didn't feel like it was actually happening. A suspiciously short amount of time later, the doorbell rang like 4 times. The clinking on the window stopped by this point. This was all too suspicious. It felt like some kind of robbery attempt. I ignored the doorbell. I stayed in my bed. was going to wait this out. I didn't have a cell phone at this time. Wasn't the most social guy growing up. I also didn't want to call the police for some reason. I waited this all out until it finally stopped. The next morning, I told my dad what happened when I called him. He told me I was smart not to open the door. Everyone agreed that everything about it sounded like an attempted robbery. Is there a chance that maybe that woman really did have dementia and that the man was really her concerned son? Maybe, but it all seemed too coordinated. Why did he want to come into the house too? How did he even know she came to my house specifically? Why didn't he ever go into the backyard to look for her when I gave him permission to do so? Too many unanswered questions that lead me to believe I avoided something terrible happening if I opened that door. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, a week ago, as I'm recording this, something happened to me personally that inspired me to revisit this theme. So my friend Cody asked me to watch his dog Theo for the night. Theo's a little pomsky, and he barks a lot. So when he started barking like crazy at something going on outside, I didn't pay any attention to it besides telling him to be quiet a few times. But when he went to the back door and kept barking, I figured he wanted to go outside. So I was going to the back door to open it. But as I got close to the door, I realized someone was trying to open the door from the outside. And then I saw through the screen of the door, there was another guy looking right back at me. This was in the backyard, which was already alarming enough. And he wasn't someone I recognized to be a family member of Cody's. So I asked him who he is, and he responded, asking me if I'd seen Melissa. Melissa is Cody's younger sister, who's in her 20s. Meanwhile, this guy looked like he was in his mid-50s and homeless. So I told him he needs to leave. There's no Melissa who lives here. And he said, "You sure?" So I said, "Yeah, you need to leave. There's cameras all over the property." He left right after that. Getting him to leave was easy. But when Cody asked his sister who that guy could have been, she said she had no idea. The guy looked like he was 55, drunk and filthy. Not exactly someone Cody's 20-something-year-old sister would be associating with. The fact that he went to the back door and tried letting himself in was actually pretty terrifying because you could only imagine what he was trying to do to Melissa. And it's why so many of these stories could be avoided by just keeping your doors locked. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. I live in a neighborhood home with my older sister. We rent the place and split the bills. This was last October, as the weather was just starting to get colder. My sister had plans to meet up with some friends in Florida, so she would be gone for almost a whole week. She invited me, but I couldn't take the time off work. Anyway, she left on Monday morning, which was a day I didn't work. I cleaned up the house and just enjoyed having some time alone. That same day, though, around 2, there was a knock at the door. I thought it was maybe a package my sister had ordered, so I answered it. It was an older man, like early 40s. He wasn't holding a package or anything, though. "Hi, how can I help you?" The guy appeared me with inside the eyes for an unsettling quantity of time earlier than answering. "Oh, I simply desired to look who lived here. Sorry, didn't suggest to hassle you." He smiled and nodded, then walked away. Idea that turned into abnormal, and wasn't definitely positive what he supposed through that. However, I closed the door and persisted my day. As a long way as I'm aware, not anything else passed off for the relaxation of the evening. The following day, I had work, so I wakened early and headed right all the way down to the office. I were given lower back domestic at 6. Only a half hour later, and while I was cooking dinner, there was a knock at the door again. I looked out the peephole before answering this time, and it was the same man from yesterday. He was easy to recognize because he wore the same exact clothes. I opened the door, though I was a bit more hesitant this time, only cracking it open. "Is everything okay?" He smiled and said, "Of course," as if I was being silly for asking that. He then said he was just checking in on me. The way he said it was like it was expected or something. "Oh, are you a neighbor of mine?" "I didn't know," I said, assuming he must be one of those older, nosy neighbors. It still would be strange for him to check in on me, but it would explain it. "Oh no, I was just walking around," he said. He was really starting to creep me out now, so I said I was fine and closed the door. I waited for him to leave my porch, then went back to cooking. I texted my sister that night, asking if she'd ever encountered that man, but she said no. I was paranoid the rest of the night. I felt safe inside my home. All the doorways have been locked and everything. However, I additionally felt like I turned into being stalked and watched. What should that guy probable need that wasn't something creepy? The nighttime surpassed again, without extra symptoms and symptoms of him, and equal with the subsequent day. He failed to knock at the door, and I was hoping it'd genuinely be not anything to fear about. The day after, I had off paintings, and it turned into the ultimate day that my sister could be long gone for. I spent maximum of my time in her and simply putting out, studying, and looking YouTube. Every so often I'd peek out the home windows, simply to be cautious. However, I by no means noticed something. Around 8, I turned into looking TV after I heard some things scrape in opposition to the out-of-doors of the house. It seemed like a stick scratching alongside the siding. I quick were given up and opened the blinds, seeing the bush proper beneath the window, shaking, and faintly, I should pay attention, footsteps strolling away. I could not see something else withinside the darkish, though. I felt like I was going to throw up. Surely it was the same man. But how long was he there? Was he sitting in the bushes trying to watch me through the window? I was so out of it, I didn't know what to do, and ended up calling my sister. Luckily for me, she picked up. I tried to explain to her what was going on, but I think I was talking too fast for her to understand. And midway through the conversation, there was a knock at the door. I didn't answer, but the man started calling out and knocking louder. He asked me to let him in, and tried to guilt-trip me by saying he was injured. Then he made excuses for being outside my home, and then started apologizing for everything. He continued to bang on the door. It was creepy and disturbing how desperate he was for me to open the door. Clearly something was wrong with him. My sister told me to call 911 immediately, so I hung up and did as she said. The man stayed at the door for a whole 5 minutes, still trying to convince me to let him in, before he finally left. What the person surely desired is unknown, and the way lengthy he changed into stalking me for is likewise unknown. He should have, by hook or by crook, discovered my sister changed into long gone for the week. It simply looks as if too huge of a coincidence. Whatever the case, I haven't visible him in any respect, considering that then. Hopefully it is over. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you. Probably aren't. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, it was just before 2 a.m. and I had gotten an Uber back to my place after partying all night for New Year's. I don't think I was plastered or anything, but I definitely was well beyond tipsy, and I had a raging headache. When I got dropped off, I slowly made my way up to the front door and fumbled around with my keys for way too long before making it inside. I tossed everything on the floor and took an ibuprofen, then fell over on the couch. I was exhausted and tired, but the headache was keeping me from sleeping, so I kind of just laid there with my eyes closed for a while. I honestly have no idea how long. Randomly, though, the doorbell rang. It rang several times, and I never got up to answer the door or even see who it was. At the moment, I didn't even care or think about it. I just wanted to lay there and try to sleep and not be bothered. Obviously, with it being the middle of the night, someone ringing my doorbell repeatedly should be pretty concerning. But like I said, I had a bit too much to drink. Surprisingly, now no longer too lengthy when they stopped ringing the doorbell, I genuinely controlled to skip out at the couch. I couldn't say how lengthy I changed into a sleep for. However, once I awakened, I changed into very groggy and felt weak, nonetheless with a pounding headache, and the entire residence changed into dark. I stood up and attempted to make my manner to the kitchen to get a tumbler of water, once I observed a streak of mild at the wall within the hallway. Even in my now no longer so sober state, it changed into unmistakable what it changed into. The mild changed into coming from the front door, being partly open, and moonlight spilling into the residence. Was I honestly so under the influence of alcohol that I failed to near the door? There changed into no manner. Before, I could even walk into the hallway and look at the door. Footsteps moved around upstairs. I froze, then hurried back to the couch and ducked behind it. There were 2 sets of footsteps. Walking right above me, I thought about making a run for it, but my hesitation ruined my chances as the footsteps began making their way down the stairs. There was a pause, then the sound of the front door shutting, and the streak of light disappeared. All right, let's get on with it. A man spoke. I was completely sobered up now, and realized they probably had just gotten inside moments before I woke up, and immediately checked the bedrooms upstairs. Not seeing anyone, they assumed the place was empty. My chest felt like it was burning from how fast my heart was racing. The men moved around in the room on the other side of the house and began chatting like everyday regular talk about life. I don't know, but something about it was so disturbing and terrifying. I mean, if they were so comfortable breaking into my home and having casual conversations while doing so, then what the hell were they going to do if they found me? I could hear them taking things, robbing all the rooms in the house before the footsteps made their way into the living room. The way I had it set up, the couch was diagonal in the corner, so I was kind of closed off behind it, but the couch was also short, so if they got close to it, they would easily be able to see me. I just listened as they walked around, moving things and opening every drawer and box they saw. Then one of the men started walking closer to the couch. I hoped and waited for their footsteps to stop or change directions, but they kept coming closer and closer until I saw their head show above me. They were looking down at the cushions, though, and I guess they didn't see me in the side of their vision. Then they moved on to the next room. I sat there motionless for almost 30 minutes, listening to them rummage through the entire house before they finally left. I didn't hear them say anything about coming back, but I grabbed my phone and ducked back behind the couch as I called the cops. The situation is mostly exactly what it seems like. The men came in and robbed the valuables from my home. I had forgotten to lock the front door, but there's some evidence that it wouldn't have mattered. A neighbor said they saw two men watching my house rather suspiciously over the course of the past week. Likely they saw that I lived alone and always parked in the driveway. So when I took my car to the New Year's party and came back in an Uber without my car, they thought I wasn't home. Thankfully, it seems they only intended to rob me and nothing more. But had they found me, who knows what could have happened? I was at home with my dog Hazel. It was a normal night. I'd gotten out of work already and was just trying to enjoy the few hours I had before bed. I was watching TV and eating some snacks when Hazel got up and went to the back door, wanting to be let out. I got up and let her outside to do her business. I had a pretty small fenced-in backyard, so I never really needed to keep an eye on her too much. Usually she'd stay out for a while and sniff around anyway. While I was up, I put some dishes away and cleaned up the mess I made from cooking earlier when Hazel started barking. She liked to bark at squirrels and stuff, but after a few seconds, she still hadn't let up. I walked over to the